Yeah, let's rock and roll. Thanks everybody for sitting in on this, and take it away, Matt.
All right, I'll get started. I'm going to share my desktop because we're going to go through a bit of a training. So thanks for coming to Drupal core testing with Nightwatch, getting up and running. So for those who don't know, my name's Matt Glaman. I have my own company, Bluehorn Digital. This is a recent change. Previously, you might have known me from my work at Centauro, but I have started my own company. But today, we'll go through running Nightwatch, and when sharing, I don't think I can see people like do the hand raising thing. But if you're not familiar with Nightwatch, Nightwatch is one of the testing suites available inside of Drupal. We have PHPUnit and we have Nightwatch. Nightwatch.
And Matt, I'll keep an eye on the chat if anyone raises their hands, and I'll just jump in if there are questions. Just let you know.
Perfect, thank you. So Nightwatch is an end-to-end testing framework, JavaScript testing framework. And some people are wondering, like, whoa, don't we have PHPUnit and functional JavaScript tests? The problem with PHPUnit tests is you have PHP installing Drupal inside the same site instance and testing it with PHP to test JavaScript. So Nightwatch kind of provides us a standalone instance where it's actual JavaScript being executed in the browser, and it also makes it a bit easier to run. Functional JavaScript tests are calling WebDriver, or as many might know it, Selenium. Selenium did become like an open standard known as WebDriver. And that's actually the same way that Nightwatch works, but you're just writing JavaScript. So it makes it easier to do several things. This makes accessibility testing and testing of themes a lot easier. The main goal for this and then the follow-up session after lunch is to get ready to do contributions to help Olivero, the experimental new front-end theme, stable for 9.2. I'm going to share a link. For those who want to follow along, I have created a workshop repository. And there's chat. So if you want to follow along, some of it's located there. And there is a correlating documentation website that I'll be working on to expand this for folks. So we're going to start by just going through how you run Nightwatch. And we're going to run it locally with DDEV and with Lando. If you do use Doxel or any other kind of like local setup, I picked kind of the most popular or the most common. You know, when I say local, this is something that will work if you're running nothing locally or if you're running MAMP or WAMP or any of the other, you know, like we'll call them old school or legacy setups, the non-Docker. I didn't cover Vagrant here. So if you're using Drupal VM, it would basically be like running it locally just inside of your Vagrant machine. So let's get started. Like I said, the first one I'm going to go through is local. And the reason I'm going to go through local is it will walk through setting up our tests and kind of explaining all the different configuration options that are required. So when I say local, I mean it's going to be about as local as it can get. So I'll wait for the terminal to wake up. Oh, there we go. So for this, what I'm even going to do, one preface is when you are contributing to Drupal core, you will have like the full Drupal repo. This template setup is a composer build. So it'd be great for contributing to contrib projects, not necessarily to core, but I also wanted this to be a repo example for if you start adding these tests to your projects. Every project I'm on has PHP unit tests. Like I do test-driven development. All of my client work has test-driven development, so this is like kind of me helping share that knowledge as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start the local web development server. So for those who didn't know, PHP has a built-in web server, and you run it by doing PHP -s, then 127, then you give it a host name, and port, which I always do 127 and then 8080, and then T helps you specify a doc root, But I realized since we're going to be running some tests that might need the router, we'll copy a script that core provides. So inside the core directory, there's actually a file called, where is it? Why isn't it here? Oh, sorry, it's not. When you're in the composer build, it gets copied out. It's called .ht.router. I actually have no idea what the .ht means. But this when you run a the PHP built-in server, you can pass it a router script, and that's what this script does. Is it helps provide routing. Supposedly, it works around a bug in PHP, and it just helps ensure that you can serve Drupal over the PHP built-in server properly. And they actually give you a sample of the command to run. So I'm going to copy that. And I adjust it. I've had issues where I specifically use the word localhost. So I've gotten in the habit of constantly typing 127.0.0.1. In this case, it probably won't matter. But with some tools, it tries to connect over a socket versus TCP. So that's why I always use 127. So we'll copy, sorry, when you run this, you need to be inside your doc root too. You don't want to specify. So we'll cd into web. And now we've started the development server. So if I were to go to this URL, you'll see that we're at the Drupal install page. So not using Apache, Nginx, or whatever hosting thing. We're just going to use PHP's built-in server for this. This is how I do my testing all the time. When I do testing for Contrib or whatever, I'm always using the built-in web server. So we'll get started on configuring, or the next step for Nightwatch. So Nightwatch is there's actually testing instructions. So if we were to go to the core directory, tests, then go to Drupal, sorry, it's in the README. So the documentation is in the code. It could use some updating, I believe. But this inside core tests, the README file does explain some of the various configurations. We will need to run not Chromium. You need to have Google Chrome or Chromium on your system, and we are going to run Chromedriver, which you can download yourself, or thanks to a dependency with NPM, actually there is a version of Chromedriver available. So if we go down to here, it will say running Nightwatch. So we're going to go through and we're going to follow these steps. So we're going to let this PHP server keep running. We're going to go to a new tab, and we're going to move into the core directory and run yarn install. Core does use yarn as the package manager over NPM. So you do need to have some understanding of the front end tooling. If you're new to some of this, let me get to the yarn website. NPM Composer is the package manager for PHP. NPM is the package manager for JavaScript, but it never supported lock files. It now does, but it does poorly in my opinion. And Yarn was created by Facebook, Google, and a few other companies, and is an alternative way to install your JavaScript dependencies. That's more reliable in my opinion, and that is the tool that Core uses. So we've run yarn install, and now we need to copy the env example to env. And one benefit once we go through this is if you are using DDEV or Lando, you can have this automatically configured for you and just do copy paste and not have to rely on manually setting this up. But I'm making sure to go through the manual part so that you understand what all the pieces are. So we've copied env example to env. And this tells Nightwatch how to run. So we're going to go through and configure each one. The base URL, well, we know it is 127.80.80. So we'll copy and paste that. The test database URL, it's wonderfully pre-populated with SQLite. So you do need to have SQLite on your machine and the PHP extension, which should always come with. Or you can point this to a local MySQL database. I do all of my testing with SQLite because I don't have a MariaDB or MySQL instance running on my host machine. So in this example, we are going to use SQLite. In the DDEV and Lando examples, we will use the database provided by those local development stacks. The Drupal test WebDriver hostname, we are going to run Chromedriver off of our local host. So this, you don't need to change. When you're running it locally, unless you have like an external Chromedriver, you can just keep it set to that. It can actually run Chromedriver for you. So as I said, it has it as a dependency. So if we look at the package.json into this wild, wonderful JSON file, right here you see Chromedriver as a dev dependency. So you don't need to download anything extra. It will be there for you. So we'll leave it to auto start true so that way it runs the one that has been added. When you do PHP unit in functional JavaScript, maybe you're going to run it yourself, and then you can set this to false. We'll explain that when we go to the DDEV and Lando sites. Now, this is extremely important right here, especially if you're running in containers or you want to run it headlessly. So we're going to uncomment this, and you want these three parameters. I was working on this template earlier, and I was hitting an issue where this ran. I wrote a blog post a year and a half ago to do this, and I couldn't get it to run. When you have a headless environment where it's, like a Docker container, you need the no sandbox flag. So we're going to run our tests both with we're going to start our tests. I have no idea what command does that. So we're going to copy this, and to show you what this looks like, we'll pass it with no command. So we'll let it run in a headed mode, so it will actually launch Chrome and we can see the test run, which can be neat, especially for debugging, but also can be annoying because it keeps popping up and taking priority. So I always run my tests in headless mode, but since this might be the first time for some folks doing this, we'll run it in a headed mode or non-headless. And then the Nightwatch output, this saves various reports. You can keep it as the default. Same with the ignore directories. Keep this as a default. The search directory customizes how tests are found. So if you were running your own client project and using Nightwatch, you would want to customize this to help find your root level tests if they weren't inside custom modules or anywhere else. But we have Nightwatch configured. We added the base URLs. So now we can run a test. We'll run. So when you run tests, you do yarn test Nightwatch and you specify different tags, or you can run individual tests. We're going to run against core, or actually, we're going to go with a quicker test. This project already has the quick link module installed, which was created by Mike, and it was my first time writing a Nightwatch test actually, and that's one thing we're going to dig through when we go through how to write a test later on. So let's copy this command, and we will do.
Can you put that command into chat too, please?
Yes. So it is yarn test :Nightwatch. And if you're wondering where that even comes from, inside the package.json and the scripts definition, we have test Nightwatch. So if you are using VS Code, you could find it in the npm scripts explorer right here. Test Nightwatch. Or if you're using PHP Storm, it would show there as well. The only problem is you can't pass tags. So it run every single test, which you may want if it is your own project. So we're going to do tag. And inside of the quick link, just to explain how I know it's there, the test has a tags annotation that says quick link. So if I start it, it's going to take a little bit to run. And while that gets booting up, I'll explain what it's going through. So Nightwatch, even though it's a JavaScript testing framework, it actually executes PHP code on your host. Oh, wait. This version of Chromedriver only supports Chrome 87.
I did run into that. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I said I'm getting an error too that I'm getting session not created. Yeah, oh yeah, I am getting the version 87 error. Yeah.
Yeah. So this
I
is
ran into that while I was testing locally as well, and I had to upgrade the dependency to be able to get around it.
This is where, all right, so how I recommended using Chromedriver, I was hoping we could. I should have run through that first. Don't, because it's not going to match your environment. That dependency is pinned to the Drupal Ci container. So you can download Chromedriver from Chrome. I'll paste that link. So I already have this set up, and this way you can ensure you have Chromedriver matching your version of Chrome. So you would just download it, and you can copy it into your, so I usually download it, and then I copy it into user local bin Chromedriver. I'm pretty sure you could do, if you're on Linux or Mac OS, you could do brew install Chromedriver to get it. So that's various ways you can access it. When you're using DDEV and Lando, we actually mount it as a container, so you don't have to download it. So let's say that you had downloaded Chromedriver. You're able to just type Chromedriver and hit enter and run it as the default. So you don't need to pass any flags to it. There are certain flags you can pass, but you technically don't need to. You can work with the default. So to recap, we have our PHP server running. We have Chromedriver running. Now we're going to try to rerun the tests. So if we run it, you do need to go back into the core directory and run the test. So now that that's going, I want to show some of the innards of Nightwatch. Nope, that's the test suites. So if we go to Nightwatch, okay, launched. So it will, when you have it in non-headless mode, it will launch a browser, and you'll see a notice that says Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. And now it ran through and it ran our test. It was really short-lived. So let's actually go run Chrome. But you'll see that we visited the test page, and it asserted that the quick link library has been added. Let's tag core for something that might run a little bit longer. But you will notice that it launched Chrome, and there was a lag of time that it took to be able to show the page. That's because that's the configuration. So inside the tests, there are various commands it runs, such as Drupal install. And this actually executes a PHP code on the server to install the site. So the script ran, installed the site, and now Nightwatch is going through and executing its various tests. So it uses PHP to install Drupal, and then it logs in and does all the assertions inside of the browser instance. It's like here it enabled Claro and is working with the permissions form.
So Matt, just jumping back a little bit. So I'm a little bit confused what we need to do to get Chromedriver running. I did a brew install Chromedriver, and I'm still getting some similar error messages.
That's what. So you have to make sure you download the correct version of Chromedriver for the version of Chrome you have.
Now the error message, yeah. So all right.
So like in this, I have Chrome 89. So I would have downloaded this version of Chromedriver. So you have to check what version of Chrome you have and then download that Chromedriver. So as Google Chrome updates, you do have to update Chromedriver. And whenever that error comes up, I usually just go in and re-download it. What error? Do you want to paste the error you had?
Yeah, so I'm having a couple different ones, and the Chromedriver version when I run Chromedriver-V is completely different. It's like 2.45 dot something other.
Because that's the version of Chromedriver, and the versions of Chromedriver are different than the versions of Chrome.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to figure out what I need to do. I can give you the error message that I have.
Why don't you send me the error message, and I can help debug it. And it looks like we might be frozen a little bit, or it's taking. So one thing it does. So this version of Chrome only supports Chrome version 87. So it sounds like you have an old. You installed with Homebrew.
Yeah, I just did a Homebrew install right now.
So I think the Homebrew install is behind because you received this version right here.
Yeah.
And you might need to go manually download one of these.
So I just download that and just overwrite the binary?
Yep. So you can just download this and overwrite the binary. This is one reason I do like running Chrome in a Dockerized environment sometimes because it can be a little bit simpler. Now I'm trying to figure out if this is frozen or not.
So I have Chrome 89. So latest stable release I just downloaded the latest stable release for Chrome 89, and I just say Chromedriver Mac 64.
That link. And this kind of shows one reason it's nice to have the Dockerized setup.
Yeah.
So you notice like that took forever to run, right? Like that test was hanging. It's because it installed the Umami demo. Wow. And it did a really quick test, so it passed away real fast. So each test, and this is one thing we'll go through in the next session. When you go through tests, it executes this test site.php script, which was added into the scripts directory. Sorry, scrolling to find it. So what test site does is it installs a bootstrap and it runs a Symfony application. It's just like Drush site install, except it allows you to pass a setup file and the install profile to be run. So when you write a test, you have to pass it almost like a bootstrap file that says, okay, you've installed Drupal for me. I need you to do some post-processing to make sure that I can run my tests. And that's the main part of the second session this afternoon is great. We've got tests running. How are we going to write our own setup files and actually create tests? And we'll review the quick link module. And I have another custom one in here. And we'll try to write some tests for Olivero. Go ahead, Mike.
So do you want me to hold for questions for the end? I downloaded the latest version of Chromedriver, and it's doing the exact same thing. I don't know if you want to like go over everything now and then.
We'll go over it at the end because it is one that can be finicky. And I think this is proving the point of like if you are a Lando person or a DDEV person, run it there and we'll figure out how to get the Chromedriver. Because honestly, it's one of those that I've just had it set up for so long that I don't know. I don't even remember how I installed Chromedriver. I think I just download the latest one and say, giddy up. While we're going through this, try just downloading the latest version for 90 and see if it works.
I downloaded it for 89 because that's the version of Chrome that I have, but I'll download 90.
So we had a failure when running the test suite. I got a page not found, looks like, and that can be one that can sometimes be a problem when using the built-in PHP server. I've had it where, especially when testing like the field UI, it breaks due to the length of the paths, I've noticed. But we were able to get the test running. If I go back to this env file and I'm going to change that to false for the auto start, and we'll modify the Chrome args to be disable GPU, headless and no sandbox. And if we run the test again, I've also had instances where test failed when it wasn't headless. Like somehow me using the computer and the browser existing and being shown caused like weird side effects. So that's one thing too. That's one reason I always like to run it in headless. I only disable headless if I'm trying to like debug a visual problem that taking screenshots or HTML dumps doesn't work for. So as you can see, our tests are running and there's no Chrome that was launched. So this will be written up as steps into this folder here, into this locally. I'm going to copy them in right now since I was not able to do that before. So that way we can have it. And then I'll dive into running it with Lando. Or DDEV, then we'll do Lando. So again, we did in one terminal window, we did cd web, and then we did php s 127.0.0.1.80.80, and then to the router script. And that is what has been running over here. And then in another terminal, we launched Chromedriver, which was just a simple call to Chromedriver. I'll use air quotes for simple since you could have conflicts with your Chrome version. And then you install dependencies, which you go into cd web core, and then you run yarn install, and then run tests. And to do that, you cd web core and then yarn test Nightwatch. And I'll add tags there for default, which that is what is currently running here and going through the paces. It's not tags, it's tag. So I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to close that tab, and I'm going to cancel Chromedriver because as you saw, we had some issues. I don't know if anybody else was trying to run this along and had issues as well, but that can be the problem with having local services running. So we'll start off with how many people use DDEV? Can you click the raise hand option? I want to see if I see it in the participants list. Okay, so there's a handful. Now, I'm assuming the other half might use Lando or might not use anything. I know there can be quite the local development war over who prefers what.
I use both.
Both. I use both too. I am a DDEV person, but I got thrown onto a WordPress project that uses Lando. And just for the record, I think it's great that there are two companies that are building local development environments and trying to streamline this piece of this major component in our lives. And Bluehorn Digital is a sponsor of both organizations because I couldn't work if I didn't have either tool. So let's go to DDEV. So DDEV allows you to provide custom service definitions. And what that means is you can extend the default things that run with when you launch a DDEV site. Because by default with Drupal, it would just give you the application container, which has PHP and Node, and a MySQL container, and like PHP MyAdmin as well. So with this, we're going to create a Docker compose.testing file. And inside your DDEV folder, anytime you create a Docker compose.whatever.yaml, it gets merged in and added to the running services. So what we'll do is we're going to define a new service, and this service will be called Chromedriver, and we're going to use the Drupal Ci Chromedriver production tag. You might see on the web, there's various documentation that points to a WebDriver. I think the image is WebDriver-Chromedriver. These images are the same thing. I pinged Ryan Aslett, who's Mixologic from the DA and the infrastructure team, and it's something about like the script when it was generated. They're the same thing. So if you see either tag name, they are the same. We're giving it a container name to match the other ones where it's DDEV, DDEV site name, Chromedriver, and a few of the labels. So that way DDEV knows how to discover our container. This is all documented in the DDEV read the docs for defining custom services. So I will add this to the docs for DDEV as well. I'll paste that into here. So that's where we are running Chromedriver. We're not installing Chromedriver on our container or onto the app container because we don't have to. That's the beauty of Docker, is everything is a service. We are updating the web service to link to Chromedriver. That way, from the web container, we can do HTTP, Chromedriver, and it knows how to network and access it. And now for the next step. You recall we went into the core folder and we had to copy this env file and configure it. Well, I'm going to delete it because we don't need it anymore. So I'm going to move it to the trash. Because what we will do is we're going to define it as environment variables on the web container. So you'll see here, Drupal test base URL, HTTP web, because it knows that the website is accessible from the web host name. We're going to pass the DB URL, which we will pass the database connection string for the DDEV database. Jack, you're on Doxel. This should be, so once we get into this territory, especially DDEV, it should be easy to copy paste because it's compose YAML. Lando's different because they just have their Lando file. So the good news here is this file is a Docker Compose file. So you can reuse it for any kind of Docker-based setup that uses Docker Compose. So you see here the WebDriver host name that matches the name of our service up here. And then we're going to set auto start to false. The cron args, basically everything we configured in that .env file, which stands for environment file, we pass as environment variables to our to the web container, so that way it knows how to talk to the Chromedriver. So now we'll get back into the terminal and we're going to run DDEV start. In this example, I do have it taking care of some of our maintenance items or grunt work. So using their hooks, after it's been started, I have it cd into the main directory and run composer install. I then also have it run yarn install for Drupal core, so that way you don't forget about that. And this is used for PHP unit, which is outside the scope of this training, but will be documented in the full repository. So as you can see, I ran DDEV start, and now it's running yarn install for me, so that way I don't have to worry about it being out of date or forgetting. And once that runs, we'll run some special commands I crafted. So DDEV allows you to create custom commands, which are just bash scripts that it can parse and lets you run DDEV my command name. And they run in the web container. We have a Nightwatch command. And this is just like a shortcut, so you don't need to run DDEV SSH CD web core. It just runs it for you. So with this, we're able to run DDEV Nightwatch. As we did before, we can do DDEV Nightwatch tag core. And once this finishes installing, we will rerun it. It had to recompile the node modules because the operating system changed. It's a different environment. I did yarn install on my Mac, and then it determined that, oh, I'm in a different environment. I have to rebuild the modules that were installed as dependencies. Give it a little bit. It takes a while because it's running inside Docker for Mac and Docker Docker for Windows and Mac both have really bad performance problems. It's not Docker's fault. It's just containers don't run natively on those operating systems. So they have a virtual machine layer that is hiding in the background. And if you are curious about how to write custom commands with DDEV, that is documented as well, just to fill the time while we wait for 20,000 dependencies to get linked. I love JavaScript tooling. We'll type, container commands. So I'll copy this into those docs as well. That's in the README, sorry. So the README will have all these documented. So that way anybody can come back as a point of reference. And, testing's my jam. It's what I really enjoy doing. And I would like this to be an open repository for more people to get involved in testing, because then you have good coverage and you can ship reliable code, and you can contribute to core and other contrib by helping ensure test coverage. Man, this is taking a while. So in the end, when you run this, it'll take you more time to get your dependencies installed than it will to configure DDEV and the services file. Now, I realize when going into this, I didn't clarify that if you are using DDEV, you might need to have some knowledge of Docker. And I keep talking about a services file and Docker Compose. Docker Compose is a tool with Docker that lets you compose an app. So you have these Docker Compose files that specify services that are run, and it will ensure that they all execute together and build a network. Okay, great. So this is now run. So if I were to type DDEV, you'll see that my custom Nightwatch command shows up here, and so does the documentation for it, which was parsed from the description and usages here. So if we type DDEV Nightwatch, I'm going to hit up to go into my history, and we'll run tag core. So this is going to run the same thing that we ran locally, but with inside the web container. And it's going to run it in the correct directory. It's going to run test Nightwatch. And we didn't have to type all this. We didn't have to run DDEV SSH to get into the server. We just had to execute all of these. We just had to execute this custom command, and it would run everything. And we did not have to configure the .env because we provided overrides for everything right here. So Nightwatch is going to read from the global environment variables added to our container, and no one had to copy the .env file, because let's say that you upgraded Drupal core to a new major version. When you do that with Composer, it usually deletes the dependency and then reinstalls it, which means this core file folder would go away. That means your .env file that you so gracefully crafted and spent time configuring was deleted. There's ways to work around this to preserve it, but by putting it into your local environment variables, it helps prevent any of these files from being deleted. Drupal's this weird duck where our dependencies live inside our actual project files instead of off to the side, and we are requested to modify our dependency files for things to work. So I like putting these into the environment variables because then I don't have to worry about this file being removed. Now, if you are working on core, the .env file is ignored, so you don't have to worry about accidentally committing it. But if you were working with your own custom project or your client project, I would put it into environment variables so you don't have to worry about updating Drupal core and losing the file. Or if you've patched core, every time that you install it, it gets deleted and reinstalled, which means that that file disappears. I know that happened to me a lot with phpunit.xml, and that might be the most comparable situation for most folks. So that is one benefit of using the environment variables. So as you'll see, we've got everything up and running. Ran the command. It is going through the Claro autocomplete test. It passed. It's now moving to another one. And all we had to do was copy in and set up the services.yaml. Well, sorry, I spent time earlier, but now all you need to do, or anyone else needs to do, is just copy this file and they'll be up and running. There is a tool called Quick Sprint that DDEV creates and manages. Thanks to Mr. Radcliffe. We have an issue opened to add this file so that way it can automatically be scaffolded. So if you are using the Quick Sprint, you'll have this available immediately and not have to copy paste anything. So that will be a nice benefit for those who are sprinting. Yeah, and Jack, so you had the problem with phpunit.xml. I have, for those who are curious, in this README, I go over a blog post on how I configure phpunit.xml to prevent that from happening. You just copy it into your project root and adjust some of the paths. But I want to try to stay on topic here because I know I am one that bounces around quite a bit. So I'm going to cancel the test because we've proven that this works. So now what I'm going to do is I'll show off how we can do this in Lando. So I'm going to run DDEV power off. If you don't have the pleasure of working between Lando, DDEV, or with Pygmy or any of the other local development environments, every local development tool has its own router, which is what says, hey, you went to foo.ddev.site, it goes to this container. Oh, you're on Lando? If you go to lando.site, it goes to this container. Both systems have a power off, which stops all projects and removes the router. So that way you don't have a conflict, because if you have DDEV start and then do DDEV start and then you turn it off, but go start a Lando project, it complains that port 80 and port 443 are in conflict. So I am very grateful that both have a power off command to make it easy to switch between projects that are using Lando or DDEV. So before I run Lando, I'll quick show the Lando file. So Lando has a Lando file. It's using the Drupal 9 recipe, and I have it using Composer 2. Unlike DDEV, the app server takes a more, you could say like holistic approach, or one that you would see in production where it only has Apache and PHP. You might even see, normally you would have your PHP FPM service and then Apache to the side or Nginx to the side. But that's going into DevOps things. But for Lando, the app server just has PHP and Apache. DDEV puts its tooling also in the main server. So as I brought up before, Nightwatch needs to execute PHP code because that is how it installs the Drupal site and runs some other various commands. So you could add another service, a node service that has PHP. I started with that, but then you have yet another Docker image or container running that you don't need to, and yet another image. I luckily now have 2 terabytes on this machine. My last MacBook had 256 gigs only, and I was in a constant battle of Docker images eating up my disk space. So the easier alternative is to just add this build as root option, root or root, depends on where you're from, and run the node install script, which is luckily 2 lines of code. And then we install yarn as well. So this way our app server container has node available. And then in our build, we run composer install and then also yarn install, just like the post start commands in our DDEV. This just gets everything set up. So if you did want to start working on some contrib tests, you could just use this template. And then we specify in overrides. So with Lando, when you have a recipe, you provide overrides to some of the services. Now, in the end, this gets mapped to a Docker Compose file. With Lando, it abstracts it more than DDEV does. So it looks the same, but is not the same. And again, we basically copied everything over. We did some modifications. Instead of web, it's app server because that's the name of our app server host name. The DB URL, when it's the recipe, based on the Lando recipe or environment you have set up, it gives you different database names. So with DDEV, it's always DB, 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 just D and B across the board. With Lando, it's Drupal 9 for the username, password, and database name. I'm pretty sure if you use the Drupal 8 recipe, it's Drupal 8, etc. We are giving it the same hostname of Chromedriver because that's defined below. Again, auto start false. Chrome args the same. So pretty much the same setup. Pretty same. In the end, it's just Docker. And to add a custom service, you under your services, collapse app server. So under this services key, you define Chromedriver. It's type compose. This is documented inside the Lando docs. But if you're familiar with Lando, you probably know what this is. We specify the same image. And one thing I found out, because this kept crashing, is when you define a custom service with Lando, it always overrides the entry point. Now, if you're not familiar with Docker, every Docker image at the very bottom of the Docker file says, what do I run? You specify a command, and that's what it runs, and the Docker image lives so long as that command keeps on running. Lando swaps that out for probably their own entry point command and then wraps what you pass to it. So we have to copy this command from the Docker file. For those who are curious, you can find this information actually in the Drupal Ci environments project on Drupal.org. So I had to go into the Docker file, and at the bottom you'll see the command is here. I removed the logging so that way it would all be exposed to Lando, because you can run Lando logs to see all the log output. And then for Lando to create custom commands, you actually add to the tooling definition. So here I added one for PHP unit to run PHP unit, but the one we're going to execute is Nightwatch. So the service is our app server. Give it a description. The command, you'll notice here I have the command shortened to just yarn test : Nightwatch, because you can specify the working directory. So we're telling it to run in app web core. So I'll get back to the terminal. And for anyone who's curious, I am using the control key and the tilde key to toggle terminal. I have no idea how else you get to it. I don't know what you click. That's what I know. I don't primarily use VS Code, but I use PHP Storm, but I know VS Code is used by a lot of people, so maybe it would be more familiar for folks. So if I do Lando start, the party is going to get started, and it started our proxy, and it's going to start our various services. Reading the chat. So Chromedriver via Homebrew on Linux migrated from core to a cask, and casks are only supported on Mac OS. Fun. And so I'm pretty sure with Homebrew, a cask is any recipe or any software that's a user interface. I think that's what they differentiate casks to be.
It's really one that it's one that installs an app, that installs a Mac app. So that's what a cask is.
Oh, so they just straight up remove support from Linux then, because
it never had it on Linux. Yeah.
Okay.
Never had casks on Linux.
Sorry, I mean Chromedriver. Chromedriver was just full on removed from the Linux Homebrew install because it got moved to a cask, and casks are Mac OS only.
Okay.
Got it. So yeah, so you're better off just downloading it, or if you wanted to, you can also just run Chromedriver as a container on your machine if you have Docker. But I'm guessing if you have Docker, you're probably using one of these local environments. So now we have our Lando site running. And if I type Lando and scroll up a little bit, you'll see we have the Lando Nightwatch command. So I'm going to copy that, and we'll run it with tag core. And just like DDEV, this should be pretty uneventful and just run without anything exploding because we have everything configured properly. So it's actually, I was going to say it's pretty easy. It can be straightforward to configure these setups. Probably the worst part is the Chromedriver conflicts, which now that this is running, I guess we can circle back to Mike. How's it going?
Pretty good. Thanks to Brian Perry's help. So I ended up modifying the package JSON to say like version 89. Redid a yarn install, and at that point it worked. I also had to leave that comment, that line 47 of the .env where you specify the various kind of switches and stuff like that. I had to leave that uncommented, and at that point it's running.
So that way I can document this. So you changed this to 89.
Hold on one second. Let me look at your screen. Yeah. So I changed that to 89 and then did the yarn install.
Okay. So let me.
And that's probably, I mean, that'll work
note
for
of
us now.
this.
It's probably not a great long-term solution though, because it's editing core.
Oh, I'm getting a phone call. I'm gonna take this as important.
Okay, I'll make a note of that, so that way anybody who wants to run it locally can try to solve that. Or install Chromedriver. Actually, would it even be, I wonder if it'd be better just to say at latest to override it. I'll try that after we do this training. So does anybody have questions? I know this was kind of like abstract because we didn't like dive into running the test yet, or we have the test running, but there's just setting this up can be the hardest part. And I just wanted to make it be reproducible and something people can mostly copy paste. Fortunately, the local one isn't something you can really copy and paste because you have to configure it. But does anybody have questions?
So you wrote like 3 blog posts on doing this with DDEV like year or two ago. They're the authoritative thing on the thing, and you've got them in the README.
Yes.
Do those need updating? Are you going to update them?
Yeah. I'm going to update them because if I go to the first one, let's see. Since we're doing Nightwatch, let me even go to the Nightwatch one. So in this Nightwatch blog post, I don't configure any of the Nightwatch env files here. But part of that's due to the fact I wanted people to understand what they mean. So I think I want to update this to have the shortcut, to have it all inside the DDEV, or maybe I'll just update it to move to the to this format and not fully explain everything, so that way people do have something more easily to copy paste. But my plan is to go through and update all of these.
Excellent. That's great. So they'll be at the same URL?
Yep, same URL. So for anybody who's interested, they are in the blog, they are in the README for that repo. I wrote a series on running PHP unit for kernel, unit, kernel, and functional tests. And then also for running functional JavaScript, which functional JavaScript is our PHP unit tests that execute Chromedriver and JavaScript tests. The good news, if you are using this setup that I've outlined, I'm sure you've noticed, because it's not hard to miss it, it has the PHP unit configuration here. So you're able to execute Core's PHP unit test and Nightwatch test with these configurations. If I close that and I did PHP, I can't type. I got a new keyboard and it is just taking some time to get used to. So like here, if I targeted the functional JavaScript test inside of the action module, it will run because we have the environment variables here and ready to go. And another reason I do want to make this easy to run is every test, every fix for core requires a test. And I know with Drupal Commerce, I would not accept a single patch unless it had a test. And like good test, not like, oh, well, I did a basic assertion. It's like, no, like it needs to prove this thing works left, right, up, and down and into the future. So writing tests isn't necessarily hard. The hard part is running them and verifying them. And I want to help document that and make it be something that everybody can enjoy because I love writing tests. I want
Hard part is maintaining them.
Well, yeah, maintaining them too. Well, yeah. I mean, but that's the good part. If they don't break, that means things are working. You need to be scared when you make major changes and nothing breaks. That's when you gotta be scared. So April, yes, thanks. I wanted to make sure to show different setups. I know I'm impartial to my way of just running it locally because then I don't need to have Docker running. Especially, back when we used to be able to travel and go in planes, I would use my flights to just write tests for things. So, and Docker eats up CPU and battery. So being able to just run PHP's built-in web server and use SQLite is a very efficient way to just write tests and get things rolling and can be a little bit faster sometimes. Any other questions or any testing related stuff? Like, okay, so anything around there. Benji.
So I have a question about Lando. If you chose to have a separate node container running, would it run into trouble because the Nightwatch is running node, which then has to run PHP, which is on the other container?
Yes. So let me actually show you the closed pull request. That's one cool thing too I want to show about this. So add test Nightwatch and workflows. So previously, let me find. Pass no sandbox. Believe it's in this commit. So before we pass this override, and I can run a Lando rebuild to add this, but it might take a while. Essentially, it gets to this script and the test runner. So Drupal Nightwatch commands. So Nightwatch lets you create different commands, and inside the Drupal install command, it uses node's execute command and runs PHP. So it executes a PHP script. So even though it's an end-to-end JavaScript test framework that's running in Node, it still makes a call to PHP to install the site, because otherwise we would have to go through the visual installer, like functional JavaScript tests do. Like I wish that our functional tests ran this command. So to run Nightwatch, you do need to have PHP on the server, so that way it can install Drupal for you. And yeah, so if you ran, so before Nightwatch pointed to the node service, and if you did that, it would bootstrap Chromedriver, get Nightwatch ready, and then exit out with an error about PHP not being available.
So to clarify, like the new container that you're using has both Node and PHP in it.
Correct. And there isn't a default Lando provided container that does that. That is that build as root step, which is documented somewhere in here. So if we do build as root, so build steps. So this outlines all the various ways you can do it. And I'm actually, you know what? I think how I found it is I typed in Node, and they have a guide for installing Node in your Lando PHP service. So
Absolutely.
I copied it from here, and then I had to do the extra step of installing Yarn, since that's an additional dependency. Which honestly, like if I'm on a project right now, it's a Laravel app, and we have a separate Node service to run our compile our things. I might just do this to the app server instance just to remove like the extra service. Maybe not, don't know. But
yeah, there's different philosophies on that, but I have had to do a similar thing to get Yarn working with BLT. So,
you know, because it's one of like, let's face it, like a perfect world, you would have a service for everything. Like PHP would be its own service, but it's local development, right? You're not, this isn't for deploying the app. So local development, you know, it's nice to just have a larger app container that has your tooling in it, because it can remove some complexity. It's just a matter of preference. Oh, I know I want to show one thing too. So if you are curious, there's tests. So this repo actually runs Lando and DDEV and local and executes the tests. So inside the GitHub workflows, the local is a little bit more convoluted because I do have to set up PHP and cache it. But this is the non-documented documentation where you run composer install. You run the web server. You run Chromedriver. I don't have to install it because the GitHub image already has it. We run PHP unit and we run Nightwatch. Inside Lando, we run the Lando installer for Debian. I never say it right. I don't know which way is right. Run Lando start, run Lando PHP unit, run Lando Nightwatch. And then I was having issues with Chromedriver, so I have it run Lando logs on Chromedriver if there's a failure. And for DDEV, somebody already wrote a GitHub action for setting up DDEV, which I want to contribute to because it seems to take about a minute longer than Lando, and I wonder if it could be sped up. But again, this tests the custom commands and the exports the logs from Chromedriver. So as this is worked on and we improve any of the local environment setups, it does have automated testing for the automated testing integrations. And I hope that this can also serve some examples for integrating with CI services. So that way you can have your tests be happy and running as well. The one thing I wish I wanted to cover, but I didn't, is actually running Drupal Ci locally for all of this. But I figured that's a more convoluted setup, and this would be more streamlined for most people. Any other questions? Or anybody that tried to set up and having some setup woes?
So if no one else has anything, I have something again.
Yeah.
So I have Nightwatch running.
Mm-hmm.
I have one, when I do the tag core test, I have one command that fails, and it's an umami thing. The command that fails is like the PHP command that runs like the test site install. So I started to troubleshoot that by running that command from the command line first, and I identified that I was running into memory issue. I fixed that, and now that command, like when I run that command, it doesn't produce any output, so I don't know why it's still failing. How would I go about troubleshooting something like that?
So what we can do, let me power off Lando, and so normally I don't do it. I don't run that in VS Code, because what I'll do is set up various terminals with
Mm-hmm.
iTerm, because this is a lot easier to kind of see things that are going on. Oh. No,
I like your iTerm theme.
I don't know what it is. I set it up once. I think they came up with a new update, and it has like a clean approach that changes this tab stuff. All right. So we've got Chromedriver running. We got PHP built-in server running. So you went to. So what command did you run again? You did yarn test nightwatch.
Yeah, so I didn't start Chromedriver in like a separate window or anything. I just kind
You
of
used the built-in. That's right. You used the one that is a dependency. So let me close that out.
yeah.
Let me. I forgot I deleted the configuration. So let me. Let me just get back to that state real quick. Package.json, Chromedriver. I want to try something real quick too. Yarn install Chromedriver at. Is it? What is it? What do they use? Is it at next or latest?
I have no clue.
Let's try at latest. Oh, yarn add. Right, you're supposed to be the front ender. You're supposed to live in with.
I don't even know what JavaScript is.
Oh, yarn add D. Hey, check that
Yeah,
out.
it worked. There you
All
go.
right, so I'm going to copy paste that. So that's an easy way to get things updated, and we're going to put that into the handy dandy collection of notes. And let me just reconfigure this really quick. So HTTP 127. We use SQLite, host name, yeah, localhost, auto start is true. I don't need to change anything else. So you ran yarn test nightwatch, and you did
Tag core. Yep.
But the umami theme is what broke.
Yeah, it runs a command that says like the PHP install command, and it has a setup file and install profile and all that.
Was it the install profile test?
Yeah, I believe that's it right there.
All right. So let's do copy relative path.
All right.
And I think I just need to do that. And that's how you can run. Oh, shoot. That's not a tag. Sorry. So you are able to run individual tests by giving it a path name. That is documented here in the README. Down at the bottom. Oh, let me get into preview so it's actually readable. So yeah, I forgot to turn into headless. Somewhere in here it says that you can run a test that way. Oh, to run a single test. There you go. To run a single test, you just pass that. For debug, you are able to. That's for PHP unit. I know in somewhere. Sorry, 1 second while I find out. Oh, I don't have it in verbose mode there. You're able to pass --debug to get verbose output, but I think the only thing it will show are the JSON data it posts to the WebDriver or Chromedriver. Well, it's Chromedriver is to the WebDriver API endpoints inside of Chromedriver, not necessarily the local execution script. So let's see if this runs. So it is going to take a while because it's running the demo umami. So I guess we'll dive. I'm going to go through this again in the afternoon, but we'll kind of dive into it here with the test since we have it open. So this Drupal install file that you see right here, reveal in sidebar, that Drupal install maps to this command called Drupal install. A little bit of magic. So exports command function Drupal install It takes a setup file, an install profile, and line code. So this test is saying install with the test site install script, and we want the demo umami theme. And then it executes the command as web server, which down here you'll see sudo. Oh, I didn't realize it did that. Wait, never mind. That's if the environment has that pass, which it does in Drupal CI. Otherwise, it just runs the command. So it doesn't try to do sudo on your local machine. And that executes this script called test site, which is the test site application, which runs the install command. And this is the same install command as the quick start command as well. I think maybe they're different. Actually, they are different. But this is like running Drush SI, as I said before. Okay, we quit. So Mike, so this failed for you?
Yeah, that did fail.
What,
and I also tried running. I ran the test just like you did by passing in the actual test.
Want to paste the error?
Yeah, sure. I'll paste the whole thing. Where do you want it pasted?
You can do it in the chat so that way everybody can see.
Yeah, sure.
There's one thing I'd like to do is in the README, I even opened like a notes area about the no sandbox, so that way people don't have that problem when running it headless. There's a way to fix that, and I've opened I've actually opened an issue and used the new GitHub or the GitLab merge request to open a merge request to fix that. So we hopefully don't need to pass no sandbox anymore.
I don't think it's letting me paste too much. So I'm
there we go.
I'm gonna do a number of things here.
So connected, fail.
It's only letting me put so many characters at a time.
All right, so testing element is present in 5 seconds. So it sounds like your site's just not reachable. As I read that, wait, so command, okay, never mind. So it timed out reaching the site, but that's because command failed PHP, scripts, test site setup, install file, install profile, the deep URL as JSON. You know what you could do? Want to copy that PHP script and run it locally and see what happens?
Yeah, I already did that, and I ran into one issue that I resolved. It was a max memory PHP memory issue, but now when I run it after resolving that, I don't get any output, and I'm running it again right now.
Okay. I'm gonna make a note.
Just a little plug here. The reason to use a Docker-based local development environment is so your whole team can do it without you having to do any support.
Yep, that's what that would solve this.
So if you don't want to have problems like Mike in this call, that's why you should get DDEV or Lando. Because
unless you have to do it on an airplane.
Unless you got to do it on an airplane.
But actually, you can, I don't know about Lando, but DDEV works fine on an airplane. I mean,
I just wouldn't run I would always run it locally, so I didn't have to have Docker running. But if you got an outlet, then do it.
I mean, I'm a big fan of local installations. I did everything that way for years. The problem is when you have to teach somebody else how to do it, or you have to change the config. I mean, like what you're trying to do. I mean, if Mike had a little more time to work on this, he'd get his just perfect until he needed to change it. And
until Chrome updated.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I tell you what, this isn't that important because I know that we can write that I can run the other tests directly. So I can we can write some Olivero tests and run those directly. So
it sounds like I want to just at least make the note here, because now I lost the on. This is going to be a horrible note, but probably no.
It's a horrible note, Matt.
Probably memory. The demo takes a lot to install. I mean, that's probably it. It's installing the Umami demo, which installs all that default content. So that's probably your issue. And when we work on the Olivero test after lunch, we shouldn't have any of those issues.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to time. And
So
I just wanted to do
a couple of questions.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm trying to get it set up with Lando. So I guess you started with Composer Create project to get Drupal and the web directory and all that stuff?
Yes, which if you're going, are you setting up so you can contribute to Drupal core?
So if I do that, I have to use the 9.2.x branch.
If you did that, you actually want to download, so I realized that after I got this all set up, that this isn't a great example if you want to contribute to core, because when you use Composer Create project,
It moves things around.
it uses the Composer install.
Right.
So you'll want to create it off of the actual development trunk or the development repository.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, but otherwise, go ahead, sorry.
So the other questions are for Lando. So I found in your repo you have the services defined. So I was able to copy and paste that. But can you give us the tooling somewhere?
Oh, yep, the tooling should be at the bottom of it.
Benji, I don't know if you're asking us from the perspective of trying to add this to that Lando Drupal contributions repository, but I'm actively trying to do that right now.
Okay.
And if I do have something, I'll post the PR in the chat.
Right. So Matt, maybe I just haven't figured out what you're looking at and whether it's public. I see the
So here, so if you go to the .lando file,
repo. Where?
Oh, in the in the GitHub in my workshop example.
Yeah.
So if you go to .lando.yaml, we have
okay.
services. Then at the bottom is where it has the tooling definitions.
Okay,
So
I see now. Yeah, thanks.
When you grab, so what you could do is you don't need to run Lando init. You could just copy this file and paste it into there. Which is one thing that I'm adding now. So this repository is based on a composer build and not meant for core contributions. Can't type. It is fine for contrib. To set up your own core contribution environment, follow the following. I'll make that better wording. So you could do git clone there, and then if Lando, if DDEV, so I'll add these quick notes into here so that way folks can get a bit of this. And I'm going to commit these changes. Yep. I was about to. Yep. Thank you. I forgot to fix that. You know what? VS Code doesn't have spell check built into it.
There's a plugin for that.
What good is
Yeah,
this
there's a
thing?
good plugin for that.
Oh, yeah, there's a good plugin. Microsoft can go. There we go.
So how long have you been using a light theme there, Matt?
For about 4 months, because I realized dark themes were hurting my eyes.
Really?
And I used a dark theme only for PHP code. Rust, light theme. Go, light theme. JavaScript, light theme. Java, light theme. PHP, Dracula. And then I was like, why? So I finally went to light themes, which I feel like they also work better when I do my live streams and screen sharing. But yeah, it was just PHP was the holdout, probably because I used a dark theme for like my IDE with PHP for the past 12 years, but nothing else. And then I finally changed it. Any other questions? I pushed up that change, which would up. So this also, if you do go to the GitHub Pages version, it's GitHub Pages, so it auto updates as well. So I'm going to try to work on this being like a documentation page, which then folks can help me figure out where this belongs in the Lando, DDEV, and Drupal documentation. I'd be more than willing to get it into its proper home, but don't want to go to my main organization. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope this gave everyone a way to jumpstart getting their local testing environment set up with their favorite way.